Yeah, so what are we going to do today? So as I said, we're just going to continue on with examples of security valuation. Now, what I will not do is the waterfall analysis part of these exercises in today's lecture. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to start with a payoff diagram for a security, right? And we're just going to practice the valuation part of valuing that security, which is 2 steps, if you recall. The first step is replication. And then once you've replicated that VC security with those underlying ingredients, right? Some combination of the startup as a whole, call options on the startup as a whole, and CNBCs in the startup as a whole. Once you've done that replication step, then the next step is to do the valuation step, where you use the Black-Scholes template that I provided last lecture, and that is available on my courses. Okay, so we're focusing on those parts, not the waterfall analysis part today. Sound good? All right, so I'm gonna go and share slides here. Share screen. Can everyone see that? Can everyone see my slides? Perfect. So look, there's some good news. I actually view the replication step and the valuation step as fairly algorithmic. Look, the reality is that waterfall analysis is algorithmic as well, but the waterfall analysis algorithm is way more complex than the algorithm for replication and the way to use my Black-Scholes template. The way to use the latter two, right, replication and valuation, it's so simple that I can actually rigorously lay it out on a slide. So I'm just going to read this slide right now, but that is literally the replication algorithm once you know your payoff diagram. What you do is you look at the payoff diagram of the VC security that you're valuing. And the first thing you look at the left side of your payoff diagram. Look, with a VC security, when an exit value is 0, that's what the left side is, right? The left side is X equals 0, correct? When X equals 0, the company is worth nothing. No one gets anything. That's pretty much what always happens in the capital structure of a startup. So you know every single security will either start with a 0 slope or a positive slope, right? All you have to do when you start replicating a security is you look at X equals 0, i.e. at an exit value of 0, what is the slope of the payoff diagram of my security? Let's call that alpha. Once you know alpha, you know to replicate the security, you must hold alpha units, right? Go long alpha units of the entire startup. That is the first part of your replicating portfolio. Then what do we know happens in the payoff diagram of a typical VC security? There's a combination of jumps, drops, slope increases, and slope decreases, correct? Whenever you see a slope change, you look at the strike price, the value of X, where that slope change occurs. And if the slope change is a slope increase, you measure the increase in slope. So let's say it goes from 1/2 to 3/4. Well, that is a 1/4 increase, correct? To match that 1/4 increase in slope, you go long 1/4 of a unit of a call option on the entire startup at that strike price. If you have a decrease in slope, you go short the call option in the right amount. It's as simple as that. Notice what I'm just describing to you. Do we agree? That's a pretty visual exercise. It's just follow your payoff diagram from right to left and pay attention to changes in slopes, Pay attention to changes in levels, i.e. jumps or drops. Are we okay with that? So what about jumps and drops? To match a jump, if you have a jump of size J at exit value K, you match it by going long J units of a CNBC, right? The cash or nothing binary call on the startup as a whole with that strike price K, right? Because when you buy CNBCs, you create a jump. When you short a CNBC, you create a drop. So if your payoff diagram has a drop of 5 million, you go short 5 million CNBCs at that strike price. Now, one thing you should keep in mind here is that every single derivative, i.e. every single call option and every single CNBC in this replicating portfolio, we assume that it has a maturity date equal to our anticipated exit date for the startup, what we called the parameter big T in topic 3, part 1. Are folks okay with this? And that's it. That is the algorithm. What about the valuation algorithm? Well, once you know your replicating portfolio, what do you know? Your replicating portfolio holds alpha units of the whole startup, correct? Well, buying alpha units of the whole startup costs us what? Alpha times V, where V is the current value of the startup. Do we agree with that statement? Right? If it's 0.5, that means buying half the startup, and the startup is currently worth 20 million. Well, that would cost us 10 million. Do we agree with that statement? This is just price times quantity. It's like a shopping cart. You see what I'm saying? The only thing is we need to know what V is. In the real world, the way we get V is we do the stuff that we discussed in topic 3. On the exam, I will tell you what V is for the topic 4 question. But on planet Earth, you would have to get an estimate of V using topic 3 material. Make sense? And then, okay, look, this is a bit of a nerdy writing, okay? I admit it, okay? Because this is a summation. Some people don't like to see these Greek symbols, right? But all this is saying is, look, your replicating portfolio contains N different call options. You get the value of each of those different call options. And you get the quantities of each of those different call options in the replicating portfolio. And you just do quantity times price plus quantity times price plus quantity times price. This is just a shopping cart, right? If you go buy stuff at Walmart or at IKEA, you know, that little piece of paper you get that's like a rectangle, that's doing the same thing as this formula, right? Plus, you've got M different CNBCs, right? For each of those CNBCs, you find out what is the price of the CNBC and you multiply it by the quantity. So now the question becomes, well, where do you get this price and where do you get this price? You get it from my Black-Scholes template. That is what my Black-Scholes template is doing for you. It is telling you what those prices are if we make the same assumptions as the Black-Scholes model. And then we're done. Now, this is not perfect, let's be clear, because the Black-Scholes model makes stylized assumptions. And those assumptions are not legit perfectly in a startup context. Okay, so there's a bunch of assumptions made in the Black-Scholes model that we do not believe are true for startups. And so because of that, you know, using the Black-Scholes formula here is a guesstimate. It's not a perfect tool. But look, honestly, we shouldn't be surprised about that. Nothing is perfect. Welcome to planet Earth, right? The question is, can we do better than this? And my view is we cannot do better than the Black-Scholes model in a way that is off the shelf, right? In a way that we can calculate in Excel. If we wanted to build a better model that is truly, truly adapted to startups, there's like no way we could implement it just in Excel. And it would require an entire course of very, very mathematical stuff just to answer that one problem. Like, that's such an endeavor that literally finance professors, myself included, we do not have a super tailored model for this type of problem. So none of us have actually bothered to do that, mainly because it's not clear to us how much all that extra effort buys us in terms of accuracy anyway. So I mean, I'm not even joking. There is not a model geared to this, not just like on my computer, but on any finance professor's computer in the world. Trust me, I've asked several of my contacts that are also nerdy academics that teach VC. None of us have it, including, you know, the folks who teach this at Stanford, at MIT, at Northwestern, that the model just hasn't been created, right? So this is literally the model we use, right? So hopefully that justifies why I teach it, right? So even though it's not perfect, look, my view, it's important to know when you use something imperfect, because it ensures that you don't take it too seriously. But the flip side is, just because something is imperfect doesn't mean we shouldn't use it, because it may be better than nothing. And this is one of those scenarios. We know we're not using a perfect technique, but it's the best we can do. Folks okay with this? So what I'll do now is let's go ahead and use those two algorithms, replication first, valuation second, for a waterfall analysis problem that we solved previously in our waterfall analysis class. Folks okay with that? So in particular, if you look back to your document called Extra Waterfall Analysis Exercise, so it's on my courses. It's a handwritten, well, as you can see, it's a handwritten document. You might remember we did this pretty complicated waterfall analysis problem where we had three securities. We had, sorry, I'm just going back to the statement of the problem, right? We had a Series A that was convertible preferred, a Series B that was convertible preferred, but with mandatory conversion. That created jumps and drops, by the way. And we had a Series C that was participating preferred with a cap. So this is what we call a very complicated waterfall analysis problem, right? So I won't give you something that complicated on the final. Oof, yeah, probably pretty happy about that, right? So that's on the upper end, but I just wanted to give you guys an example of an upper end difficult one. And you guys will see plenty of examples of more intermediate range ones via the practice finals. Sound good? But so if we do a waterfall analysis for that company's capital structure, right, there's those three investors, Series A, Series B, Series C, but there's also founders. So we have 4 stakeholders. So that means when we do a waterfall analysis, we get 4 payoff diagrams. We get a payoff diagram for Series A. We get a payoff diagram for Series B. We get a payoff diagram for Series C. And then we get a payoff diagram for founders. Founders, they own common equity, right? Equity without any downside protection. So in principle, I could ask you to value any of these stakes. I could say, give me the value of the Series A payoff. Give me the value of the Series B payoff. Give me the value of the Series C payoff. Or I could say, what's the value of common equity? Do you guys see what I'm saying? I could ask you any one of those questions. I could even ask you 2 of them. Or 4, that would be mean. On an exam, that would be mean. But on an exam, I could ask you to do 2. I'm just going to pick one right now. Is that okay? I'll pick the Series C. This is going to be the one that we're going to value right now. Folks okay with this? Okay, so remember I told you replication is a visual exercise? I'm about to prove it to you because we're going to do our replication with virtually no use of a calculator. Okay? Remember, we replicate from left to right. What is the initial slope for this security? 1, exactly. So since it's 1, how many units of the startup as a whole do we own? 1, exactly. It's as simple as that. So ingredient 1 in the replicating portfolio is long 1 unit of the startup as a whole. Full stop, done. So far, so good? Now, what's the next thing that happens? Oh, you know, la-di-la-di-la-di-da, or something like that. Now, all of a sudden, something changes at 50 million, correct? What happens? There's a change in slope, correct? The slope falls. It falls by how much? 1. So how do we create a drop in slope of 1? We go short 1 unit of the call option on the startup as a whole with a strike price of 50. So far, so good? Now, nothing is changing until we get to 80. Once we get to 80, something else happens. The slope goes up. It goes up by how much? By 5 divided by 45, correct? So how do we replicate that kink? We replicate this kink by going long 5 over 45 call options on the entire startup with a strike price of 80. That is our third ingredient. Now, what happens at 125? At 125, our slope falls. Now, this is one where I actually need a calculator, but I'll just say it in words. Okay? The slope falls from 5 over 45 to 5 over 55. The difference between those two numbers, 5 over 45 minus 5 over 55, whatever number that gives, it's easy to calculate in Excel. I think we can all agree, right? That's the number of call options at a strike price of 125 that we need to short. We need to short because the slope went down. Are we okay with this? Now we keep on going. You know, we reach 200. Oh, there's a slightly more complicated stuff happening here. Because notice, 2 things are happening here, right? There's a jump, but there's also a change in slope because the slope goes from 5 over 55 to 5 over 60. Do we agree? Yes, no, maybe? Yes? So there is both a jump and a kink. By the way, almost always when you see a jump in VC securities, you will also see a kink. So whenever you see a jump, look for a change in slope. It's actually something, look, I've taught this for a few years. It's a mistake students often make. The first thing they see is the jump. They get all excited about matching the jump. I'm not sure if the word is excited, but something happens in their brain. They're focused on the jump and they somehow forget that the slope changes, right? They usually come hand in hand. The reason is, usually when there's a jump, it's because of mandatory conversion. And if there's mandatory conversion, there's a change in the number of total shares in the company because someone now has shares, correct? Well, if the number of shares in the company goes up, everyone gets diluted and their slopes fall. Does that make sense? So that's why those things come in hand. But in any case, right, this was our first, second, third, fourth. Our fifth ingredient, the jump is 0.36 million. So we go long 360,000 units of CNBCs on the startup as a whole with a strike price of 200 million. Do we agree? So do we agree? That's not so complicated. Once you know the size of the jump, this is easy. So hopefully you guys agree with me. we could do something batshit complicated. It would take us longer, but our brain is not needing to work that much harder. Do we agree? It's just every bite is super easy. Right? The only bite that some people historically have found tricky is this one, because they only focus on one thing instead of remembering to check for two things. So some people get choked up on this bite, but they shouldn't. Somehow they forgot to chew. Just don't forget to chew, right? So what's our next ingredient? Well, as I said, we just matched the jump, but we have a second thing happening here where we need to match the change in slope. So that the slope falls here. So we need to short. How many do we short? 5 over 55 minus 5 over 60. Whatever number that gives, we short that many units of the call option on the startup as a whole with a strike price of 200 million. Are folks okay with that? Again, like if you've been comfortable with every step, the rest of the way is a walk in the park, because we're just doing the same logic in little mini steps over and over again. Because now we get to 1.25 billion, right? 1,250 million. And the slope falls again. It falls from 5 over 60 to 0. So how do we do that? We short again. We short 5 over 60 call options on the startup as a whole with a strike price of 1.25 billion. We okay with that? Now we're at a slope of 0. And once we get, this is 1.8 billion. Sorry if my writing is not super clear. Right? But at 1.8 billion in exit value, remember, don't forget this. The x-axis here is exit value of the startup as a whole. But at 1.8 billion, slope goes from 0 to 5 over 60. So to match that increase in slope, we do what? We buy 5 over 60 units of the call option on the startup as a whole with a strike price of 1.8 billion. So you'll notice I'm being very anal with my use of the words here where I say the full thing out, right? Just, I do it out of discipline. You just need to remember, you're always saying the same thing at the end, right? It's like on the startup as a whole with a strike price of this. And notice nowhere did I tell you guys that maturity date, right? So as I've been saying this, I haven't told you the maturity date, but we know what the maturity date is. It's that parameter T from topic 3, part 1, right? This is a Series C company. So the average Series C historical data is 3 years away from exit. So every derivative that I mentioned here, so every call option and every CNBC should have a maturity date of 3 years. Folks okay with this? So now we are done with the replication step. We literally only need to use Excel on a couple of occasions to be able to do this problem. Everything was visual once we knew this payoff. Are we okay with this? So why don't we do the final step now, which is valuation? Are folks okay with me doing that? Which is just, we are going to now take our ingredient list in the replicating portfolio. Look, that's the way that I think of a replicating portfolio. This is a recipe, okay? This is like a fruit salad. And what we just said with a replicating portfolio is we told us how much of each kind of fruit we have in this salad, right? We have this many cherries, we have this many apples, we have this many oranges, we have this many dragon fruit, we have this many acai berries, you know? It's just an ingredient list, right? It's an ingredient list that creates exactly this payoff function. And so the last step is just take your ingredient list, go to the grocery store and buy that shit, right? And, you know, usually when you go to a grocery store, you find out what's the price of a dragon fruit. Like you look at the receipt on the, or the tag or something on the dragon fruit, or like on a little piece of paper above the dragon fruit. Well, the analog of doing that in our example is enter the data for the dragon fruit in my Black-Scholes template and read out the right price. Right? And then just do everything shopping cart style. Literally, that's what we're doing. That is what we are doing with the valuation step. The Black-Scholes template is like an easy way for you to get ballpark prices of the ingredients in your ingredient list. So shall we go do that? All right, let's go ahead and do that. New share. Whoops, no, I don't want to share my Outlook. Which one do I want to share? I think it's this one. Can you guys see my, this may be a little bit too small, but folks see this? Yes? Okay. What I have here is the replicating portfolio that we did. Okay, so everything that we said in words a second ago is here. Long, 1 unit of the entire firm. Short, 1 call option with strike price 50, 3 years to maturity, because 3 years to exit on average for a Series C. Long, this was 5 over 45. Can you guys believe me when I say everything I said in words before is exactly tabulated here? Okay, so this is my replicating portfolio. And what are my ingredients? I have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 ingredients. 8 ingredients. You might be like, wait a second, 8 ingredients and you only have 6 columns. I'm doing a little trick here, which is if I can use 1 column for 2 ingredients, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And so I've got 2 columns here that are actually going to be used for 2 ingredients. That's why it's like 6 plus 2 equals 8. With the benefit of hindsight, I'm kind of regretting having done that, but it is what it is, okay? This template, everyone remembers this is what my Black-Scholes template is? Yes? And remember I said, don't you dare change anything other than the yellows? Okay? The yellows is the only thing you touch. In order for us to do the valuation, I need to give you some basic information. The basic information I'll give you is I'm going to assume the startup is currently worth $600 million. So V, the startup as a whole, is 600 million. In the real world, you would have gotten 600 million by doing some valuation stuff like we did, say, with the Dropbox examples. Folks okay with this so far? And then I'm going to assume the volatility of this company is 90% per year. So that's why I put 600. 600 million, that is the underlying price. That is the value of the whole startup. Okay, so this number here is always the value of the entire startup. Are we okay with this? Dividend yield, you don't even need to think about it for this course. This will always be 0. 0.9, that was the 90% volatility. Folks understanding how I'm entering in data here? Riskless rate, I don't mention it anywhere here, but you would plug in the riskless rate. On an exam, I will straight up tell you the riskless rate. Are we okay with this so far? Then maturity 3, because on average, a Series C has 3 years to exit. A company that is in a Series C company. By the way, you use 3 for valuing the Series C security right now. This is important for you guys to note. If I asked you to value the Series B security, what number do you think you would put in here? So a Series B company usually has 4 years to exit. Meanwhile, a Series C company usually has 3 years to exit. So if I am valuing the Series B security in this Series C company, what T would you use for the Series B security that happens to be a security on a Series C company? So the answer is simple. I'll just give it to you. You will put the maturity date of a Series C company. So you will use 3 for valuing the Series C, but also the Series B and also the Series A. Because even though a Series B company has 4 years to exit on average, a year later when it's become a Series C, that security has 3 years left to exit. You see what I'm saying? You use the same T for every single security and stake in the startup. You are consistent across every security. So you don't say to yourself, oh, well, this might be a Series C company, but it's a Series B security. Let me put T equals 4. No, that's wrong. That is wrong. A year ago, when that Series B security was brand spanking new, it had 4 years to exit. But now it's got 3 years to exit. Right? It's kind of like, if I buy a car in 2020, right? And a usual, I don't know how long cars last. Let's say 10 years. Okay? Cars last 10 years. And so when I bought the car in 2020, it had 10 years left. Well, in 2025, it doesn't have 10 years left anymore. It's got 5 years left. Right? So when the Series B security was brand new, it had 4 years left. But a year later, once the company has a Series C, even the Series B has 3 years left. You see what I'm saying? Anyway, I'm probably belaboring the point, but it's a nuance that I just want to make sure that we understand. You will use the 3 for every security in this company's current capital structure. Are we okay with this? And then notice there's this one row of yellows. It's the strike prices, right? Our first strike price is 50, next 80, next 125, next 200. Notice there is 2 things with 200. So I am combining 2 things into component 4. See what I'm saying? Next one, 1.25 billion, 1.25 billion. And then last one, 1.8 billion, 1.8 billion. So this is the data entry stage. It basically creates your custom catalog, right? The custom catalog is this red strip. And from this red strip, this is a catalog. You know how to pick up the value of your security. Because all you have to do is price times quantity plus price times quantity plus price times quantity. So I have 1 unit of the entire firm. So B2, 1 unit of the entire firm. The entire firm is worth B14, right? That's alpha times V in my slide that had the nerdy formula. You guys see what I'm saying? Plus, well, it's actually minus here, right? Minus because it's short. You see what I'm saying? So I am short 1 unit of what? Call option strike price 50, T3 years. Well, I look at the red strip and I look at the call. I'm like, the call with 50, this is the number. That is the price of that call option. Plus B4, which strike price 80. So 80, that's component 2. This call option, it's worth that much. Sorry if this is difficult to read. Like, I think if you're trying to look too much at the Excel formula, you're making your life more difficult. So maybe, can I, instead of referring to the Excel formula, can I just kind of highlight the cells and talk through it, right? But like, right? So it's 1 times this minus, because this is short, minus 1 times this, plus, because we're long, this many units of this, because this has 80, and this is the column with 80, minus this much times, okay, this one is 125, so 125 minus this. And then the next component is it's long because it's a jump. So plus this times, now notice I take the CNBC, right? You need to take the correct part of the red strip, right? This was a cash or nothing binary call. So I look at the CNBC, find the right column, which has 200, and that's why I select this number. You guys understand what I'm saying? Right? This times this. And then we are short this many call options also at the 200. So this one and this one are both represented in component 4 in my template, right? So minus this times this. And then finally minus this times this. And then plus, because it's long, plus this times this. And this whole messy formula here does exactly that. And that gives us an answer of $83.5 million. So the value of that payoff diagram is 83.5 million. Any questions about this?
A quick question I'm having is what is the unit of, is that one share, one preferred share?
No, it's literally
Series C.
No, it's the entire, it's literally if you take all Series C shares, put them all into one bucket, it's the value of that bucket. So if I told you there's 1 million Series C shares, what is the value per share?
Like 83 cents?
Yeah, no, $83.
$83, I think you said 100 million.
Yeah, right, because all the Series C shares are the same. So once you know the total number of shares, you take that number and you divide it by the total number of Series C shares. That's the price per Series C share. Does that make sense to people? Yeah, good. That was a good question. Folks okay with this? By the way, here's another thing to notice. Usually we want to do this calculation because we want to find out, is this a good deal for LPs that have to give the money? Do we agree with that? So let's assume the following. Let's say LPs, they need to give, like, let's say the startup is raising this Series C right now. And let's say the startup wants to receive $70 million. Is this a good deal for LPs? Now you might be tempted to say, oh, wow, that sounds like an awesome deal for LPs, because 83.5 million is way bigger than 70 million. Of course, we should jump at this opportunity. Where I say we, I mean the VC. But remember, this 83.5 million, does it all go to the LP, yes or no? No, right? Because the GP, the general partner of the venture fund, charges some fees, correct? And remember, I said there was 2 types of fees. There was management fees and there was carry fees. We discussed this in topic 3, part 1. And the way it works is actually, even though the startup is going to get 70 million, the LPs are going to have to pay more than 70 million, right? Because they pay the 70 million and they also cover the annual management fees, correct? So how much does the LP actually have to pay to buy in? It's not 70 million. It's 70 million augmented by 3 years, because there's 3 years to exit, of 2% annual management fees. So they don't pay 70 million, they pay 70 million plus 6%, right? 3 years of 2%. You guys see what I'm saying? So actually, when the startup is receiving 70 million, the LP is paying 74.2 million. Are we okay with this? It's a simple rule to remember. You take the amount the startup is being given and you multiply it by 1 plus M, the annual management fee, times T, the anticipated exit date. Let me just draw it, just so you see it. I0 is the $70 million investment. M is the annual management fee. 2% is the most normal management fee charged by VCs. And T is the expected exit date. We expect to exit in 3 years. Right? So if you plug in 70 times 1 plus 0.02 times 3, that's how we got our 74.2 million. And what does this mean? 74.2 million means the LP, to make this investment of 70 million in the startup, must actually send a check for 74.2 million. So what they receive in return better be worth more than what? 74.2 million. Do we agree? So what do they get in return? Well, they do not get, I realize that I'm on a small screen again, so I hope you guys were able to see what I wrote. If not, apologies. I did say it in words. What do they get? They don't get 83.5 million, right? Because some of that money gets kept by the GPs as a carry fee, right? What percentage do the GPs actually, sorry, do the LPs actually keep? That was something I called the LP share in topic 3, part 1. So if you don't remember it, just review the video on topic 3, part 1. Go to where I talk about LP share. I gave us a formula in topic 3, part 1 for the LP share. So we can calculate that formula. Here we get LP share equals 0.931. That means 93.1% of this value is expected to go to the LP. So if we take 83.5 and multiply it by 93.1%, we get 77.8 million. That is the value of what the LP receives. So in this case, is this a good deal for the LP? Yes or no? It's a good deal for the LP, right? Because they pay 74.2 million and they receive 77.8 million. Fabulous. Christmas time. Right? That's not so bad. It's like 3.6 million. I'll take it. It'll pay for the home I'm getting and a little bit more. So yeah. You want to see something else that's a little bit cool? I'll do just one more thing and then we'll wrap up the course. Do we generally agree that there's an element of guesswork in this 600 million? Like if I told you, hey, everybody, I just did an exit comps analysis and I got a value of 600 million. Are you like, oh yeah, it's definitely 600 million? Or are you like, okay, that's nice to know. Could be a little bit lower, could be a little bit higher, could be a lot in either direction. Like, what's your reaction? Like, it's totally 600? Or is it like, well, we'll see. So it's more the latter than the former, correct? So here's a very interesting, I love this exercise, by the way, is I can ask, well, what should the value of this be so that the LP breaks even? You guys see what I'm saying? So I'm just going to create a cell here. Difference equals this minus this. So this number is positive. When this is positive, you're happy. That means you win. Here's an interesting mathematical exercise. We have a template right now that when I change any of these numbers, everything gets readjusted correctly. You guys see what I'm saying? So if I make this number go down a little bit, 590. Let's see what I'm going to push enter, okay? So notice all the 590s changed here automatically. Notice the number went down a bit. By the way, if the company was worth 590 instead of 600, this is still a good deal. Do we see? What if it's 575? Still a good deal. 550. Oh, okay, not so good anymore. What do you think I'm going to do next? I'm going to use Solver to find the number for the value of the whole company that makes LPs break even, right? All I have to do, data, Solver, right? Can you guys see my little Solver box here right now or no? You see it? Okay. So I say, look, I want to set objective J40 equal to value of 0 by changing B14. Folks, okay with me doing that? Solve. By the way, this and 0, I don't give a fuck about the difference. This is, 9 divided by 10 to the power of 7. It's a tiny number. I will keep the solver solution. 554 million. What does this mean? I have now answered, I think, a pretty interesting question, which is so long as the startup is worth at least 554 million, this is a good deal for the LP. Can we see how this would be an interesting question for the VC and the LPs in the VC to ask? It gives you it tells you what you really want to think long and hard about, right? If you're asking yourself, is the company worth 600 or 700? That's not that important of a question for deciding whether you want to invest or not. Do we agree? If you're asking yourself, oh, is the company worth 500 or 600? That's a more interesting question because the answer to that question tells you whether you want to invest or not. Meanwhile, if you think the company is worth between 200 and 400 million, well, whether it's worth 200 or 400, it doesn't change your decision. You don't want to make this investment. You see what I'm saying? So by doing this kind of solver analysis, where you create a break even for your ultimate investor, which is the LP in the fund, it allows you to focus on what valuation ranges matter. You care about whether the valuation is above or below, roughly speaking, 554 million. And so it tells you what you want to focus on. Are you comfortable with the startup being worth more than that or not? If you're comfortable that it's worth more than that, go ahead and make the investment. If you're comfortable that it's worth less than that, go ahead, pass. If you're not sure, because you can imagine scenarios where it's below and it's above, that's the more difficult decision where you need to do more digging. You see what I'm saying? So I actually like this as a final way to wrap up our analytics around this VC security valuation toolkit. Because we have now figured out two things that we can do with this Black-Scholes template. One, if we are willing to take a stand on the value of the startup, we can value the securities. That's what we did at first. But we just introduced a second thing we can do. If we're not sure what the value of the startup is, but we want to find out whether we should make the investment on the behalf of the LP, and we want the LP to break even, we now can answer almost like a reverse question. How valuable does the startup need to be in order to justify making this investment for our limited partner? And to me, that's actually a pretty practical question to be able to answer as well. I will not test you on this second question, but I just figured I would give you guys a little bonus at the end of the semester. And it's not that complicated to follow, given what, what we had done with figuring out whether this was good or bad for the LP in the prior mini part of this exercise. I do expect you to be able to come up with, let's go back to the original number, 600. I expect you to be able to get this number. I also expect you to be able to get this number and be able to tell which of these two numbers is bigger and know what that means, right? If this number is bigger than this number, don't make the investment as a VC. If this number is smaller than this number, make this investment as the VC.
Jiro?
Yeah.
As a clarifying question, I just want to be certain here. The 600 is the value of the startup today, not at exit, correct?
No, yeah, exactly. 600 is the value today. Well, let's not lose track of the fact that that was exactly the question we answered in topic 3. Right? Topic 3 was all about like, what is Dropbox worth right now? Oh, it's worth about 4 billion, or it's worth about 850 million, or it's worth about 50 million. Every time we did a valuation in topic 3, it was all about getting the value today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions about this? So yeah, let me just repeat. You guys are going to get more examples of this process, both the waterfall analysis part and the replication and valuation part via the practice final. So I hope that will help make some of you guys feel more comfortable with this, because I do know it's, this is the kind of thing where practice has a tendency to make perfect. Another thing I'll mention, this is just a practical pro tip for the final. Something that people sometimes worry about is, oh my God, if I do the waterfall analysis wrong, am I completely screwed? Am I going to lose all my points? Even if I know how to do the second and the third step, even if I know how to do replication and valuation. So I've got some good news. The answer is no, you're not completely screwed. When I look at your replication and when I look at your valuation, I do not continue to reduce your points if you did those parts correct, given your errors earlier. So if you made an error in part 1, but given your error in part 1, you did part 2 correct, you will get all your points for part 2. The way I like to say it is I don't compound your errors. By the way, in the real world, your errors compound. So that's a bit of a difference between the safety of Planet McGill exam, at least, McGill Jiro exam, and Planet Earth. Planet Earth, it's really shitty if you make a mistake at the beginning, because it can, the mistake as you get to the deeper and deeper problem can get worse and worse and worse. And then you can find yourself out of a job and being the wrong kind of legend. I don't want you to be the infamous legend. Notorious. I don't know, notorious. It used to be considered bad, but now it's considered good in its own way. But anyway, whatever. That's not relevant to VC. So yeah, in the real world, you want to make sure you get every part down. But for the exam, especially since I know waterfall analysis is actually, for some people, the trickiest part of this problem. It's the most complex algorithm. Because of that, I don't want to over penalize you for a mistake there. So yes, of course, if you make a mistake in waterfall analysis, you will lose point in the waterfall analysis part. But you can make mistakes in that part and still get all your credit in the later parts. If your later parts are correct, conditional on your error in the waterfall analysis part. And my hope is that makes you feel a bit more secure about the final, because it means the final, at least with respect to the topic 4 question, is more forgiving. By the way, no compound errors. I do the same for every quantitative problem. So I don't compound your errors for topic 3 problem either. And I don't compound your errors for a unit economics problem. So you make an error in one part, but the rest of it is right. Given your error, you get your points. Okay. So that's a commitment that I make to you. Sound good? All right. This pretty much wraps up what we are covering for this course. So I will give you guys an overall rundown of everything that we've covered, with a special focus on what's testable in the practice final, the final review session. Actually, I might as well announce it in words. I'll send the email as well. But the final review session for VC is going to be next week, Monday, from noon to 4 p.m. So that is when we're going to do it. I will send out an email about that, right? So that means Monday, December 7, 2020, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. That's when we're going to hold it. 4 hours, I know, probably seems long, but we really need that time to give justice to the full course. I will also record the session so that if you can't make it, you can have a chance to see it asynchronously. Or if you get sleepy, you can leave and watch the rest of it later. But again, my focus there is going to be iron focused on preparing you for the final exam. So hopefully that will give you an extra measure of comfort with respect to, feeling like you know what to anticipate. I don't like to give people exams that come out of left field. Okay, so I give exams that are challenging sometimes, but everyone's taking the same exam and things get curved to the most generous. Okay, so to me, like, if everyone's taking the same difficult exam, it's not that big of a deal. But what it isn't going to do is blindside you. You will know what to expect, so that if you have prepared to the best of your abilities in all the parts, you should feel confident that you're going to get the grade that like a grade that is fair. I think at the end of the day, that's what we care about. That's what I care about. Actually, I wish I didn't have to give you guys grades, but like, anyway, that's the worst part of my job. But I do realize that some people believe that that's important to incentivize you to learn. But yeah, so it's important for me that you guys feel like you have the guidance on the exam, so that again, I know some people feel that in other courses, there are these super surprises that like are unanticipatable and create all sorts of unfairness in outcomes. I'm really not a fan of that. So hopefully you guys will feel better about that stuff if you don't already feel comfortable with it after the final review. But just to close things off, I do want to say that it's been a pleasure to teach all of you. Like, I've been extremely impressed by the quality of the deliverables that I got with respect to homework 1. It was outstanding. You guys have asked good questions throughout the semester, both in live sessions and over email, over private Zoom office hours, so on and so forth. So you guys have, on a very regular frequency, impressed me. I did not know what to expect at the onset of the semester. I think all of us didn't, right? But I've been very positive about how you guys have been doing, and so you guys should feel proud of that. And this statement is true. I'm not even hedging my bets. This statement is true regardless of how people end up doing on the final. Okay, like, again, I've seen the quality of the work, seen the quality of the questions. You guys should be proud. I've heard some of the stories of the challenges that you guys have had to confront during the semester as well. I've heard some of the hustling that people have done, where they're doing a full-time internship while they're taking their course load, because they're like, you know what, I can watch a video at night. Different people have done things their own way this semester, and I've been impressed by that. It says something great about the quality of McGill students, the quality of you, your ambition, your drive, yada, yada, yada. Okay, it's all great stuff. So I view it as a privilege to be able to play a teeny tiny role in developing your human capital. So thank you for that opportunity. And, you know, I hope you guys find that my course delivered reasonable value to you, and maybe got you a little bit more interested in startups, VC, and stuff like that. If that's so, that's great. If you really, really get into it, please don't hesitate to keep in touch in the future, because I love to try to connect my ex-students with each other when I feel it can be win-win for the two sets of ex-students, or the practitioner I know and the student I know. So if you're really serious about that stuff, don't hesitate. You know, connect with me on LinkedIn. Periodically, let me know how things are going, and you'll be on my radar. It feels good to help people that way. So in any case, you know, really wonderful job to everyone over the course of the semester. Thank you very much. And yeah, hope to keep in touch. And I wish all of you the absolute best. Thank you.
Thanks, Jiro.
The end.